D'accord, c'est à vous. Bon après-midi. Je suis prêt pour une autre réunion excitante. Mon ami Michel, je présente une politique, je pense.
Machuki Mwangi from the Kenyan Internet Exchange Point in Nairobi, and Frank Habich from the Tanzanian Internet Exchange Point in Dar es Salaam. The hat I'm using at this stage is the manager of the INCS in South Africa, so Jinx, Sinks, Dinks. And what we're hoping to get out of this policy is for AFRINIC to set aside particular internet number resources for use explicitly for internet exchange point peering LANs. So the text at the slide is actually incorrect. It should be saying that the policy reserves discrete IPv4 and 2-byte ASN numbers for use at peering LANs. So let's just make that clear. The text, I believe, is correct on the website. I am looking at because I'm website challenged. So let me make this clear. There was some discussion on the mailing. Click. Are you clicking? Are you clicking? Is it me? You got it. Okay. So I think I don't need to explain this. We all know that V4 is going downhill fast. AFRINIC's pool is being depleted quite quicker than we thought it would. We all know that any kind of IPv6 transition strategy that you're using today also relies on IPv4 at some level. We know that we need more internet exchange points in Africa. If you're not certain why, we can discuss this after the policy session. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that as Africa develops her internet exchange points, and there are currently 31, 32 if you count the new upcoming Mauritius internet exchange point. So 32 exchange points, 57 countries according to the policy team, I'm told. There are lots of countries that don't have any, lots of cities that don't have any, and what we're trying to do is make sure that as these digital economies grow, internet exchange points can develop in them. So there's a lot of text about why, well, there's actually very little text about why an exchange point is useful and all of that. I'm assuming everybody here in the room knows why all of this is important. Probably the thing that's not openly obvious to some of you is why we asked for reservation of 2-byte ASNs. So internet exchange points have a particular idiosyncratic element. We use BGP, we use the messages that are passed in BGP for, amongst other things, signaling full BGP policy updates to participants at an exchange point. The current BGP specification has a fixed size. The fixed size will allow us to be able to use two 2-byte ASNs, one 4-byte AS or one 2-byte AS to signal a policy change, or one 2-byte AS and one 4-byte AS, which is not quite the same thing, but certainly not two 4-byte ASNs. There is work, I think there was work that was put into the ITF. There was a draft that was sent out. I've got the details if you want it, to try to get this fixed, but there was no consensus on that, and it's likely that that's going to take time. There are workarounds to get internet exchange points to kind of nat their way through the policy process. We don't think, we as the authors of the policy, don't think that those workarounds are in the best interests of the technical community. We don't think that it helps to teach people best practices. So we're asking AFRINIC to reserve 2-byte ASNs, again, specifically for use on the peering LAN at internet exchange points for peering purposes with amongst other things, BGP root servers. Click. Okay, we're now on 4 clicks. Exchanges, as I said, have two peering. We don't define what an exchange point is. We actually fairly lax in this policy. We leave that up to AFRINIC staff. They already have ways and means of determining what an exchange point is. What we did distinguish was between the peering LAN, the shared infrastructure that exchange point participants peer across, and transit and management plans. Transit and management purposes, they can be, well, you know, we've had this discussion with the policy team. They can be 4-byte ASNs. We're not too concerned with that. What we do want to make sure is that this moves when I click it. What we do want to make sure is that there is discrete v4 available for these exchanges to grow and for these exchanges to, to grow and develop, really. The question came out as to why you need management space at the exchange points. Well, just about all the exchanges today, and those of you that run exchange points or do internet businesses in your country know the value of having things like root and TLD DNS servers. It was an interesting policy on Anycast, so hopefully we'll see a lot more Anycast services hit internet exchange points. All of these things need some sort of internet management connectivity, and that's what the /24, management /24, I should say, is for. So this was the explanation of the 4-byte ASN. What we're saying is basically, AFRINIC, we'd like you to assign some space, please. Currently, users can get, there is a policy available for users to currently get space, as in exchange point, I should say, there is a policy for exchange point operators to currently get space from AFRINIC, so we're not changing that, we're not updating that. So that remains as is. The AFRINIC, as I said, has criteria to determine what is an IX and what is valid use of the IX. This policy does not touch that, and hence is out of, I believe, out of discussion for this policy. There's a reference to the actual policy that it refers to on the website. What we're asking for is /16. Is it a /16? Yeah, my eyes. What we're asking for is for a contiguous /16 to be set aside and marked for use as internet peering networks only. This was attempted many years ago at AFRINIC. 196.223/16 was kind of the peering network. That isn't necessarily the case today. We're asking that AFRINIC set aside a /16 and allocate space out of that for new exchanges or exchanges that want new space. Again, specifically for peering, the management address space AFRINIC can feel free to treat under their existing policies. We have no recommendation on that, except that it does not come out of the peering space. Click, click, click. Yeah, as I said, we do not suggest any new evaluation for criteria for what an exchange point is or what the exchange point operator should use to justify its space. AFRINIC has policies for that, and they should feel free to continue in that space. In terms of 2-byte ASNs, we're asking for at least 114 2-byte ASNs to be set aside. The AFRINIC service region has 57 countries, and rough arithmetic put us that if we allocate at least 2, and this is quite contentious, I guess, but if we allocate at least 2 2-byte ASNs, on the assumption that most countries are probably going to try to get to 2 internet exchange points, that'll give everybody a sort of fair chance. We believe the allocations should be done on a first-come, first-served basis. So we're in Mauritius, for example. If Mauritius decided that there was a need for 6 exchange points and they applied to AFRINIC and they could go through the evaluation criteria, then they get 6. And if South Africa or people in South Africa were slower and realized they didn't want to get resources, well, first-come, first-served, right? Again, the criteria for allocation is solely AFRINIC's. This policy makes no reservation to that. There was a question about the number of resources that potentially would be available under 2-byte ASNs. Some of you may not know that this is also a more scarce resource these days. So we ask for the larger of 114 or half of the 2-byte ASN pool that AFRINIC has today. That number, or at the submission of the policy, that number is obviously known to the hostmaster team, the resource policy team. We've had this discussion with them already. So that's the resource revision history. It's still very new, and this doesn't want to go, really. No. There we go. Okay, there was some, oh, sorry, you want to go on, or do you want me to discuss this?
I think I could take over at this point. Okay, so that's the entire proposal. Nishal submitted this proposal with Frank and Matruki, and there were many comments in support of this proposal in the RPD list. There was some discussion implying that this will slow down IXPs deploying IPv6, although the discussion seemed to have been properly answered, although that could potentially be open. Not sure how to change this here, but okay. So staff analysis said that This quote may need to be further explained. The number of ASNs to be reserved should be the larger of 114 or half of the remaining 2-byte ASNs within AFRINIC block at the date of ratification of this policy. So there was a comment to clarify it. For example, if at ratification our inventory contained 100 ASNs, it seems the statement would not apply in any case since half of 100 is 50, which is less than 114. So this might be an unnecessary part of the proposal. Some questions that came up, is there a problem that this policy attempts to solve? Will this proposal help? Should IXPs be given preferential treatment over any other resource member? What about other upcoming small ISPs? Do they need to be considered as well? And for the adjacency stuff that we're looking at here with the IPv4 range, should there be an IPv6 range coordinated as well so that there's adjacency for the IXPs? Those were just open discussion points. You don't need to ask those. Okay, I think what we can do is open it up for discussion. And we could start here with Andrew. Oh, yeah. Jump right in there.
Okay. Firstly, I'd like to say I support this policy in its entirety. On the clarification that the staff raised, can we just go back one slide? I think it would just make it a lot easier to read where we've got something to the effect of either, well, it already says, be the larger of 114 or half the remaining. So that actually answers the question. So I support this policy in its entirety. If you can just go to the next slide, please. Some comments on this. I definitely see the problem that it's attempting to address, because having 16-byte ASNs, particularly, even in the case of root servers where people are announcing, when people are running 32-bit ASNs and it goes into the 16-bit and then suddenly everybody is getting the same ASN, etc., because of the translation, things get messy. As for IXPs getting preferential treatment, I don't believe they are, because you can get a 32-bit ASN if you need to, and your usage case for a IXPs have a very specific case for needing 16-bit ASNs that I don't believe exists outside of that. As for small upcoming ISPs, I would say that any ISP that is opening up, that is buying equipment that doesn't support 32-bit ASNs, needs to rethink their business plan, because the hardware they're buying at that point will be out of the arc. So, yeah, that's just a personal opinion that you really, so, yeah, I support. I'm very much in favor, and I'd like to thank the authors for proposing this.
Nishal would like to say something.
So just to clear this up, there is no issue using 4-byte ASNs if you're an internet service provider, if you're running a business that's connected to the internet. That's not a problem. We've already had that experiment. If you go back to AFNOG, AFRINIC, Cairo 2009, Haitham will remind me, it was 2009, we managed to take down a part of the internet then by using broken BGP implementation. So we know that this stuff does work. 4-byte ASNs are not an issue for operators on the internet. 4-byte ASNs become a particular use case issue for internet exchange point operators only, and only when they're using BGP root servers because of the amount of space that's available in the BGP message header. So if you're going to be at the microphone asking about that, again, it's a very specific thing. I'm trying not to be overly technical, but if you'd prefer me to, I can.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a question, more clarification.
State your name and your affiliation.
Madhvi, staff at AFRINIC. As of now, the way we issue resources to Internet exchange points, we have recently reserved a /16 for management purposes, /16 of IPv4 for management purposes. From what the author has been talking about, it's a new /16 has to be reserved for peering purposes. Would you be agreeable? Does the policy address a /16 for management purposes? Can the existing one be used, or shall a new prefix be reserved for that purpose?
Okay, so as I said in the preamble to all of this, what we require is that the peering network, the peering LANs, get allocations out of a specifically marked block. For the transit administrative purposes that an exchange point needs to happen, that is dealt with as part, your address space allocations there should come out of what you're using as any part of your normal address. Our specification is that it does not come out of the peering LAN. So using 196.223, if that's going to currently be the peering /16, then the policy requirement is that the admin transit network is not allocated out of 196.223, but comes out of somewhere else. Where it comes out of, you're the hostmaster team, you know how to do your job. I don't believe it's my job to tell you how to do yours.
My point is we already are issuing from a /16. You're comfortable with us continuing with that?
Absolutely. We have no specification on where you choose administrative space from, really.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Marcus Adome from the community. I'm neither for the policy nor against. I just want a clarification. I know that in 2005, a policy by Geoff Houston stated that from January 2010, the size between the the 2 bytes and 4 bytes ASN. So therefore, AFRINIC is just one, we have only one registry. So, but I want to know where the 2 bytes is coming from. I don't know whether it was introduced somewhere and I'm not aware. Thank you.
I feel like Nisha, we can continue on.
My name is Douglas Onyango. My first issue with the policy is the text. The problem statement documented in the text is not accurately telling of the problem you're trying to resolve. So I would like for that to be updated. The second thing is, I think I'm going to continue something that Madhva was saying just now. In our current end user assignment policy, we already have the instructions for AFRINIC to reserve and also to publish. My question is, in light of this, what is the relevance of the policy? We already have the instructions to actually reserve and assign address space from a particular block that is reserved for critical infrastructure like IXPs. Do we need to have a secondary, do we need to reserve more space in light of that? You've also just said right now, my other point is you just said just now that one of the things you're interested in, or one of the things you were looking at the back of your mind was the fact that we are going towards exhaustion of IPv4. I want to ask you if the soft landing policy and many other policies that are already geared towards this kind of initiative are not sufficient for you, because I see that if the soft landing kicks in, we probably have a lot more space. Okay, we'll be consuming them a lot slower than we are right now. I also have a general reservation. I'm thinking, yes, we've made some exceptions in the past for certain types of infrastructure providers, but doing this and moving into the future, I think it's going to bring on everybody calling themselves a special interest group who need a particular reservation or particular consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so very quickly, the first point about why 2-byte ASNs, I'm not certain I haven't already answered that. Marcus, I don't see where you're sitting. My point was the 2-byte ASNs, there's a specific header size in the BGP message that can carry information that exchange point operators, and again, exchange point operators use to help internet service providers set policy going across. So the internet service provider can use pretty much whatever he wants. The caveat is that if the internet service provider has a 4-byte AS So peer 1 has a 4-byte AS. If peer 2 also has a 4-byte AS, then those 8 bytes exceed the amount of space that's available in the BGP header message. So policy that's trying to be set at an internet exchange point doesn't work that way. That's why we need 2-byte ASNs. As I say, there was a draft at the IETF to try to fix this. The draft was abandoned, and there's no indication that this has started up again. So if I'm wrong, I'd love to be pointed to the obvious. But the people that I checked with at NANOG and the people that I looked at the IETF couldn't say where work on that is. To answer the second question, Douglas, I'm always a fan of clean and open text. If you want to suggest stuff, or if you can help me draft better wordsmith, here I'm open to listening to you, really. I think the problem that we're trying to solve was clear. I'm happy to accept that the text isn't 100%, and if you can suggest something we'd like to incorporate, we're willing. I think in general, what I would ask you is, are you on board with what the policy is trying to do? And if you accept that we're trying to reserve space for internet exchange points to be used in a particular way, then, well, we can relook at it. The part about internet exchange point space being made available in the end user policy is not correct. The end user policy classifies internet exchange points and DNS root servers as critical internet infrastructure, which is fine. We're not touching that. As I said, this does not change any definition of policy. All this is saying is reserve space specifically for exchanges, which no policy does, to the best of my knowledge. I'm looking at the policy people for guidance. They did not point out that there was an existing policy that did this, and we could not find one, so that was our reading of the end user policy.
Excuse me, I'm number 3 here, but it looked like, Michelle, this is Alain. It looked like maybe you missed Marco's point. The question was, based on the policy, there is no longer 2-byte ASN. We only have 4-byte ASN. So where is the 2-byte coming from?
Oh, thank you, Alan. I'm sorry, Marcus. I clearly misheard. I didn't have enough coffee. So there is a problem. The first thing is we acknowledge that there is a problem with 4-byte ASNs. And as per AFRINIC policy right now, in terms of how they're allocating, it's a general pool. So the AFRINIC resource team by default will give you a 4-byte ASN unless you specifically say you have a problem. And let me be clear, if an internet service provider has a problem, a for-profit organization that's trying to do this, they need to sort out their business. As Andrew said that very nicely, please go and buy new equipment. We know that there is infrastructure. We broke the internet at AFNOG in 2009. It was a learning experience for all of us. I think it was a great experience. We know that free software can work with 4-byte ASNs. That experiment is over. So this is not about operators. It's about it's not about service providers, it's about exchange point operators. Before we submitted the text, we consulted AFRINIC to find out if they have a pool of 2-byte ASNs. It's clearly obvious to me, anyway, that trying to make policy about a resource that doesn't exist is irrelevant. So we consulted them, we asked them if they have 2-byte ASNs, they said yes, they have a number, and we said great, we'd like to make sure that part of that number, because this has now become an endangered resource, if you want. Part of that scarce resource, that scarce endangered resource, be set aside for use specifically at exchange points. So they do have 2-byte ASNs. Staff can correct me if you want. They're nodding and they're saying yes. Does that answer your question, Marcus? Or do I need more coffee?
Does that answer the question? Yes? Okay. We can move on.
This is Nikweno, Ghana. I'm hesitant about this policy. My concern is it has to do with reservation, and I think if you are not careful, you open up a Pandora's box of reservations. So if the concern is about the rate of consumption of IPv4s, then maybe we should go to soft landing. Maybe someone create a different policy that reserves for all critical infrastructure, and then it will be okay. But if you just plug it for this one, CCs will come, rents will come, you know, by the time you know governments have come, government networks have come, and I don't see this as a broad enough, uniform enough policy. So even though I'm sympathetic to the expression, I wish I could find much more holistic method of preserving some things for this critical infrastructure. I mean, that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you.
Okay, noted.
Jan George, Internet Society. We have been very supportive in building new IXPs across Africa region, and we would support anything that needs to be done in order to establish the way how we can build the IXPs in this region, even after IPv4 depletion. So I think that reserving /16 is a reasonable thing. Also RIPE region did that, and I hear also AFRINIC region did that. Now switching back to the random YAM from the random community, a 2-byte ASNs reservation, yes, it probably also somehow makes sense, because even in Europe we hit operators that can't deal with 4-byte ASNs because from various reasons. And if you have this problem also here, then yeah, maybe it makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, and this is Alain. I think what I'm going to say is going to be a little bit technical, but I don't think we can solve the technical issue here. But Nishal, if we, okay, as Marcus said, we have only 4-byte ASN, so that, which means even if I give you 2-byte, okay, we add 2 zeros and become 4. So the question is, if you are requesting the 2-byte ASN, is the exchange point root server going to run BGP as old BGP speaker, tell the peers, I do not support 4-byte ASN? You saw my point. The root server, we agree, let's support that the root server is using 2 bytes. The peer has 4 bytes. Okay, so the peering, to establish the peering, the root server needs to tell if he supports the 4 or not. Okay, so if you are restricting the root server to 2 bytes, the old 2 bytes, that means the peer will be using AS23456 as ASN to talk to the root server, to the root server at the exchange point. Then, even if you are doing your community things, then you have the 2. You're not having 2, 4. But if the exchange point is using the 2 byte, but advertise the 4 byte capability, then it becomes 4 byte speaking to 4 byte.
Sorry, so excuse me.
Okay, that's noted.
As Raphaël Monnier of France, founder of France IX, biggest IXP in France. So when we started up France IX 4 years ago, the issue we had was RIPE don't give block of IPs if you don't reach the usage of /24 or at least a /20, let's say, third part of a /24. So technically, there is no need for the block of the IXP to be routed. Technically, you don't need it to be on the DFZ because it's a peer between two AS. So first point. Second point, what Douglas said, you have to be careful when you give a /23 to someone that claims to be an IXP, because it's easy to say that you are a rooted IXP. There's people doing that to sell IP transit, so you have to be careful about when you set up a /23. Someone with 2 companies just say, I'm an IXP, and I get a /23 without justification. So this is really important. And yes, we, with Bird, fully agree about the 2-byte ASN.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on the last point. You fully agree about the 2-byte ASN, meaning...
That, yeah, we have issue with the true 4-byte ASN with multiple customers, so this is something that needs to be, yes, agree with that.
Meaning that you support the reservation of 2-byte ASNs.
Yes.
Thank you. Again, just to remind you, we're not creating a policy to say what is an exchange point or how resources should be allocated to exchange points. That already exists. AFRINIC knows how to do that, and they've been doing a good job at it, and we're not going to get in their way of doing that. So. So to answer your concern about who is an exchange point operator, how do they prove validity, they have the acid test for that already.
Hi, Andrew here from NAP Africa Internet Exchange. The AS allocations, are they going to be relevant to the management resources? Is it best practice to advertise your management prefixes on the AS, on the IXP's AS?
Good question. Thank you, Andrew. We'd prefer to see them treated as separate resources. We sought consultation from different network operators that peer at multiple internet exchange points, and they indicated their preference for being able to uniquely identify, amongst other things, exchange points by, and the only thing they can use as identification purposes is an AS number. So yes, we would prefer that they be routed as separate objects and treated as separate objects entirely. We prefer, and the recommendation we've made to, and I can speak for exchanges in Africa, is that they keep all of their management stuff entirely separate from the actual peering stuff for a whole bunch of reasons, best practice reasons, that I'd be happy to talk to anyone outside of this.
My name is Fiona Songa, CEO, Kenya Internet Exchange Point. We are totally in support of this proposal in view of the experience we've had over the last couple of years. Yes, AFRINIC has got a policy that protects critical infrastructure. However, there's been challenges with us, now speaking as a Kenya Internet Exchange Point, with us being able to get additional resources when we wanted to separate our management IP address blocks from our peering IP address blocks. And staff at that point in time informed us that there wasn't a clear policy that allowed us to get an additional block of numbering resources. I'm happy to hear that staff have since, based on the trend that is going on around the exchange points in the region, have since begun to reserve an additional block for management purposes. And I hope that, my understanding, I hope, is that there is a separate block for the peering, and then for management you have at your own discretion decided to have another block that will be helpful moving forward. We also need to remember that exchange points in our continent a lot of the times are not able and don't have the capacity to buy their own infrastructure. We are dependent a lot on donations. The equipment we receive sometimes is extremely restrictive. Any support that we can get from the community to ensure that our peering fabric addresses the goals of an exchange point, I would highly encourage. And I think it is from my technical team, I'm not a technical person, but from the reports I've seen from my technical team, there are challenges when we have to address the customers with the 2-byte and 4-byte S numbers. And I think having them reserved, and these are things we're trying to do for future exchange points. There are countries represented here that don't even have an exchange point. For the purposes of them being able to appropriately get their systems in place and not have to go through the learning curves we have gone through. I am requesting that the community assists the exchange points, not because there's anything special about them, except for the role that they play in aggregating the regions and the countries, specific countries' traffic, to have all the resources they need to help them move forward and to help them get started. I am totally in support of the policy as is. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Let's just cut off the line at Mark there at the back, and yeah, Wafa, you can go. Yeah.
Many from ITI, we are already an IXP. We have a lot of good work with Michel and AFRINIC formally. I totally support this policy. It's obvious that IXPs today are elementary for the internet ecosystem and the economic evolution of internet, and I think they should have their resource reservation.
Hi, I'm Alan Barrett. I support this proposal as written, but I have some comments and some suggestions for further work. I think that reserving space for exchange points makes sense, but perhaps we should look more broadly at reserving space for critical infrastructure. So maybe someone can write another proposal about that. On the 4-byte ASN thing, Yes, there may be valid reasons why you would want a 2-byte ASN, so I support the idea of reserving some for exchange points. But we don't have a mechanism for requesting a 2-byte ASN from AFRINIC. In fact, we have a policy which says you cannot request a 2-byte ASN, you just request an ASN and they give you whatever they feel like giving you. So perhaps someone should write a policy to revise the one we did about, was it 5 years ago, and make it possible to request a 2-byte ASN. I thought I had a third point, but it slipped my mind now. So, oh yes, what Alain said about AS23456, it's my understanding that that only crops up if your software is old. It's unrelated to what your AS number is, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. Thanks.
So thank you. I've asked Adam to interject just to make one thing clear. When we started writing this, we did have a discussion with, amongst others, some CCTLD operators in the group. There was a feeling, as is obvious on the floor now, that there should be a common policy that reserves and matches critical internet infrastructure in the region. For us, the authors of the policy, we saw that CCTLDs were not defined as critical infrastructure in this region, and as none of us, the authors of the policy, operate any CCTLDs, while we may have knowledge of how this should happen, we didn't feel it was appropriate for us to speak on behalf of those CCTLDs. However, and I have the words of my co-authors here with me, we're happy to help you co-author or write something in that regard if you feel it's necessary. We run exchange points, we think we know how to do them, and we think we know what is necessary to help grow exchanges in Africa, and that's the basis of this. So while we would support similar kinds of texts for CCTLDs or anything you want to mark as critical infrastructure, please, you're welcome to use us as a reference point, and we can help you craft text if necessary. There are other some specific things that matter to internet exchange points, specifically things like the 2-byte issue, which, you know, we're glossing over, but I can explain in detail if you want later. The fact that internet exchange point peering lands do not get routed the way other networks get routed, that make IXPs, I think, slightly different from other environments. That's one of the reasons we didn't want to include a lot of that in our policy right now.
Okay.
Razvi Raman, Gabon.
I'm from Gabon. I am against this policy, not essentially, not for its content or the problem it's trying to answer. I am aware of the issues of IXP because it's a real need, same as all the programs we're developing, etc. However, I'm against this policy because, as the doctor said before, it's as if we're opening the Pandora box. In what name an IXP could be reserved by another organization of the community. And the questions which can be asked is the following. I followed Nishal when I had a presentation like IXP. An IXP is to be twined to connect for the operators can have traffic. If the operators who have already asked address blocks with AFRINIC and consider that they need to exchange in one country, why don't them let them delegate that delegating route is or to create an ASP? Why don't they have a block of IP addresses? My problem is the following. If we authorize that, what are we to say of a governmental program or something which should consider critical for a community or for a country to ask also a reservation? So that's we have to be very careful there. We have all understood that we don't create precedents which we won't be able to manage if at a certain point there's a lack of addresses, or as you gave the example before of Mauritius, who has planned to have 6 exchange points, and IXP when there are no addresses, what are going to do if there's no other organization who needs these addresses?
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Christian Bopé, je parle
I am talking in my own name, in my personal name. I think we have the exchange point in Africa is very positive, but we should be also very, very wise concerning the procedures which we're doing. The impression I have is we are creating monopoly groups. The person who arrive with his policy, it's reserved for a group. We reserve certain addresses. The one who's cleverer is going to win. I think it would be interesting in the interest of the community that we be able that this policy be a global policy, so as to avoid that one is going to come to reserve, and then if not, we're going to end by many reserve policy. Everybody's going to reserve for himself, and then so we're going to have a war of reservation. There's a peer pool. It's really very risky for our organization. To summarize, I would say that this policy, as such, as it's being presented now, I don't give my support to that. I would give it support if there are amendments so as to the global policy, not only for the exchange points. Thank you.
I think Michelle should respond to some of this.
Okay, so I think there was really one question here. Christian, if I got your response correctly, you don't support the policy, right? You'd like for this to be a global policy. Yeah?
Let me say in English, okay. My worry is I don't want to create a monopoly group. What I want is not to have a policy specific for the exchange point. If we have to put in place a policy, it should be a global policy, which may include all our diversity. Not just say, okay, me as an exchange point, I want to reserve my pool. I want it to be global. This is my point. To summarize, the policy as it is now, I don't support it. I will support if it's a global one. Thank you.
I mean, I'd like to remind everybody that these policies are meant to do certain things, but we shouldn't let necessarily the great be the enemy of the good. And
I'm sorry. I'm known for being slow at stuff. I'm confused about your use of the word global, because that means something very different in context here. So could you explain what you mean by global? Is it one of two things? Let me try and make this easier. Is it one of two things?
Okay.
Thanks, SM, are you done?
Ok. Peut-être il y a eu une ambiguïté sur les mots. When I mean, maybe let me correct. Okay. I mean the policy should not be only just exchange points. If we have to put in place the policy, should maybe include REN and other entities.
Thank you.
Not only exchange points.
So I'd like to respond to that. Yeah. I run internet exchange points. For full disclosure, I run 3 internet exchange points. There are some people in this room that do others. There are the co-authors of the list are also internet exchange point operators. With at least one of the other jobs that I do, I help to run and establish internet exchange points. So I can speak with a little bit of authority on how exchange points are run, particularly in developing environments, and how they should be done. I can do no such work for an NREN. I have ideas on how to build a big network that an NREN could evolve to, but I cannot speak authoritatively on that. And after, I think it was Djibouti, it was made very clear by the community that they didn't like the idea of people that weren't intuitively involved with something making policies on that as well. So we believe we know how to run exchanges, and that's why we've authored this policy and have brought it to the community. To address your issue of reservations for particular things, if the community feels that this is something that's important enough to make a reservation on, then I think that that's community consensus, and that's what the policy process is supposed to bring about. If the community feels that there should be consensus to reserve policy for something like the next big CDN, like Facebook coming into Africa, I give in to the community. I give in to the community's. That's not what we're trying to address here. We have a specific need, and as I said, we're writing only about what we know about.
Okay.
I can honestly tell you, I'm happy to, I and my authors are willing to support. In fact, they'll tell you, some of them are sitting in the room. We've reached out to the CCTLD administrators to say, would you like us to assist you to build something like this? But we're not going to include it in this policy. We don't think that it's the same.
Okay. Based on your response, just to summarize my point, as it is, I don't support this policy. Thank you.
Hi. Abdeljalil Bashar from Chad, follower of AFRINIC21. Donc, I would like to talk in French.
As you know, the African Union has started a project Axis, System African of Internet Exchange with the collaboration of international society. That project is going to be deployed in 3 African countries, and there will be 5 platforms of interaction, regional interaction. My question is there an interaction with this policy and international action with the African Union to accompany the choice of equipment? As you know, very soon in my country, which is Chad, we're going to have an exchange point. So it will be an independent model. In that case, do we really need to be member of AFRINIC or to obtain, to reserve this resource? Another question for IXP already deployed in Africa. Does this policy, does it have to play a big role in their functioning mode? Thank you. In operating mode, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm
very aware of the African Union's Access project. I know all 3 or 7 phases of it, depending on how you'd like to count. So as a consequence of you rolling out an exchange point, I can tell you that one of the things the African Union would have told you to do would have been to go get resources from AFRINIC. If in 10 years' time, the African Union does a resurrection of Access, let's call it Access 2024, what this policy will allow, or hopefully enable, is that there probably, hopefully, might be some V4 left specifically for your internet exchange point. So this policy wasn't written with the African Union in mind. It was written with the interests of making sure that for future internet exchange points, there are still V4 resources and 2-byte ASNs available for you. So I see it as longevity for that process. Equipment, that's a topic that's not relevant for this discussion. It's something you need to take to the African Union. You absolutely need to be a member of AFRINIC to get resources. They only allocate resources to members unless that's changed in the past 6 months. How to do that? The people that are best these people at the front are the best ones to answer that question. They can give you more.